Story 1. Cruise lines. Man overboard technology exists that would drastically reduce the number of lives lost at sea, but it comes at a cost. The large cruise line I worked at would not consider it unless a competitor implemented it first. It will never be implemented. Story 2. Nursing homes. I didn't think the worst part of emergency medical services would be learning how most nursing homes in my area treat their patients. But it is, by far. Story 3. The tomato industry. I attended a lecture for extra credit in college on the history of the tomato. I expected to learn about how people used tomatoes and where they first began cultivating them. Instead, I learned about extortion, murder, blackmail, vandalism, and more. The tomato industry was filled with serious crime and corruption. Story 4. I thought working at a local flower shop would be pleasant and idyllic until I was told to upsell grieving widows on already overpriced casket sprays. Story 5. Without trying to dox myself, I worked for some time in Tallahassee, Florida's capital. While most people would rightfully think that the largest industry by employment or revenue is hospitality, what I came to learn is that one of the most influential industries by all accounts is sugar production. If you want to learn more, I recommend exploring how sugarcane is the most widely produced agricultural product in the world, and that Florida is more or less the gateway of the largest sugar production network globally. As recently as 2021 and 2022, companies connected to this industry have been linked to forced labor and slavery. This became an even bigger industry than tobacco by the 1800s and was one of the primary reasons for the slave trade to Louisiana, Cuba, Jamaica, and other locations. This industry involves roots in historic slavery, ongoing concerns about modern slavery, influential figures such as prominent sugar industry families with legacies predating communist Cuba, payoffs that impacted American health policies for years, environmental consequences, public health impacts, a monopolistic market structure where most brands belong to the same conglomerate, including subsidiaries like Domino Sugar, Florida Crystals, C&H Sugar, Redpath Sugar, former Tate and Lal Sugar Companies, and American Sugar Refining. This conglomerate also owns a significant stake in a major sugar corporation in the Dominican Republic. The industry receives an estimated $3 to $4 billion in annual subsidies supporting U.S. sugar production. The largest competitor to this conglomerate, U.S. Sugar, is also based in Florida, which explains the significant financial influence Florida politicians have related to the sugar industry. Story 6. Surprised I have not seen the charity sector, funding fraud, mistreatment, and underpayment of staff, along with focusing more on public relations than actually doing anything of substance, are commonplace. Story 7. This will get buried, but the aquarium industry is awful. The amount of death and fish we just throw away would shock you. On top of that, many shops sell fish to people who are not properly set up to take care of the animals. Story 8. I work as a professional conductor. The competition is fierce. If you think academics are nasty, consider this. Herbert von Karajan was a media favorite. Handsome, charming, and talented. But he was also a member of the Nazi Party. When the secret police came into his rehearsal, he volunteered members of his own orchestra to be sent to the gas chambers. He was a monster. We graduate thousands of conducting students each year, and there are about 100 major podiums worldwide. To reach a podium like that, you have to do things you are not proud of and live with it. If you can live with it, that is another discussion. The politics, backstabbing, and mistreatment of others are common. Story 9. The towing and tow truck industry in Toronto is very territorial and well-connected. Story 10. Chiquita Banana and the Banana Republic companies are corporations that essentially purchased entire countries in Central America. They bought, paid for, and own all of the local utility companies, and they control the governments. These companies are responsible for many assassinations to maintain control of these countries and keep them company-owned. Story 11. I'm going to say finance, but not for the reason most people think. I work in trading, and my colleagues are some of the smartest people on the planet. Former chemists, physicists, virologists, aerospace engineers, statisticians, and material scientists. They all get burnt out, barely able to keep their research going and competing for grant money. Then they get recruited into financial firms to do the same kind of work they enjoy but get paid 10 times or even 100 times more. They don't have to deal with customers, and they see direct indicators of the quality of their work. Finance takes people who could be changing the world for the better, and once they cross the event horizon, there is no going back. The other half of the problem is how difficult it is to get funding for research to improve the world, but finance is the black hole from which there is no escape. Story 12, Real Estate. I am a copywriter for a United States real estate corporation and cannot wait to leave. It is a difficult industry. However, right now I need to pay my bills. Story 13. What I am understanding from this thread is that every industry is dark and sinister. Each and every one. In other words, it is us. People are generally unpleasant. Story 14. Higher education has become primarily focused on financial gain. Colleges suffered significant financial losses during the COVID-19 pandemic. To recover deficits, they have implemented questionable practices to boost enrollment and retention, aiming to fill seats and collect tuition. These practices include 1. Lowering admissions standards, attracting students who may not be prepared for college. 2. Instituting a no academic dismissal policy, allowing students to carry failing grades through semesters and still return. 3. Overcrowding housing by enrolling more students than available rooms, leading to triples instead of doubles, converting lounges into dorm rooms, and placing students in local motels without informing parents until move-in day. 4. Delaying the expulsion of students involved in criminal behavior until after refund deadlines. 5. Reducing budgets for campus police and security, limiting their ability to investigate criminal activities effectively. 6. Hindering criminal investigations to prevent negative publicity related to safety concerns from overcrowding and lax enrollment standards. 7. Replacing experienced department heads with lower-paid staff, affecting the quality of student services. 8. Cutting support services budgets and freezing hiring, causing staffing shortages in departments meant to assist students. Overall, these actions prioritize financial recovery over the safety and well-being of the students. Story 15. Film and television production. Grueling 16-hour days, 6 days a week are normalized. Going months without working, 25-year veterans on unemployment. Hollywood egos and abuse towards production assistants and personal assistants. Injuries and deaths on film sets due to unsafe workplaces. The list continues with many examples in the news. However, people still view Hollywood as glamorous and aspirational. Story 16. The art world, by which I mean the high-end institutional gallery art world such as Gagosian and Marylebone. I grew up in that world, and the amount of exploitation that exists at every level would astonish you. I could write a book. My advice to any young artist is to make art for yourself first and not to chase mainstream success. It is not worth it. Story 17. I don't think there is a single industry left that has not been co-opted at least partly by private equity and profiteers. That is not to say there are no good actors left in any industry, but there are fewer and fewer partly untainted industries. There are such things as big cranberries, big oranges, and big maple syrup. Not all cranberry, orange, and maple syrup growers are huge conglomerates, but some are, and they ruin it for the rest. Story 18. Casinos create the appearance that everyone is having a great time. However, they are experts in psychological manipulation and take advantage of every move you make. Reality is fundamentally manipulated at every turn. It is truly dark and sinister. Story 19. Auto towing. If they cannot fix your car, they keep it. There is no incentive for them to fix your car when they can own your car by not fixing it. Once they own the car, then they can fix it. Story 20. Call center training in automatic communication can be very challenging. I met people who had been in the industry for several years and who had complete private conversations without remembering a single word the other person said. Not because they forgot, but because they simply were not listening. Story 21. I would say sales, such as call centers and cold calling. There is nothing worse than being told to meet key performance indicators and targets just to sell people products they do not want, sometimes forcefully, under the threat of losing your job. I have been there and will never do it again, no matter how desperate I am. It is such an unethical practice when you think about it. Story 22. Healthcare, particularly large pharmaceutical companies. Look up the Merck scandal with Vioxx. Merck fabricated a journal to hide the side effects of Vioxx, which was responsible for causing tens of thousands of heart attacks. Large pharmaceutical companies ultimately care about money, not health. Story 23. I feel like since the Vince McMahon documentary came out, more people are waking up to how problematic professional wrestling is. It is not just staged fighting. It is a manipulative industry full of terrible people, with few exceptions, especially at the grassroots level. Story 24. Nonprofit organizations often present an optimistic image, but some can be toxic, with backstabbing and nepotism in the workplace. Story 25. Advertising. If publishers wanted to, they could easily identify every user, including their interests, darkest secrets, and vulnerabilities. If you share location data, they know where you live and exactly where you go. It may seem harmless when they want to sell you a new brand of underwear, but the availability of such data is the most significant vulnerability we face in the modern era. Story 26. Childcare. I work with people who struggle with certain skills, some who are unkind, and the well-meaning often get burnt out. Your child is not always safe from other children because there is little we can do about bad behavior. They might get bitten, and all I can do is write a report and reprimand the child. They may get bitten again. Low pay, low support, inadequate training for children with neurodivergence, lack of supplies, no time or space for one-on-one care, and high turnover. The school nearby is currently under police investigation. Detectives are involved. Research the center thoroughly before placing your child there. Story 27. Probably all of them. Every industry I have encountered tries to do the minimum required effort, social responsibility, and sustainability to make the most money for themselves. Food industry. A race to the bottom with the least amount of proper ingredients in their products. Pharmaceutical industry. Maximizing profits to the point that some customers go into bankruptcy. Technology industry. Product longevity just a little longer than the warranty. I could go on and on. Story 28. Reading these posts makes me feel good about the job I have. I make signs. When people want a sign made, we make them a sign. They pay for materials and labor. Easy and straightforward with no moral ambiguity. Story 29. Car dealerships and auto groups. It is a lot to explain, but it goes deeper than having to talk to the manager for that special low price. Story 30. The video game industry. As a consumer, all you see is a fun game, some big publishers, and perhaps a few interviews with developers expressing pride in a particular element or the game in general. The reality is that most projects operate under constant pressure on the developers, and it is significant. The publisher sets a release date, with millions of dollars invested by stakeholders who expect results. Most of the time, these release dates are unrealistic. This creates immense pressure on developers, who work excessive overtime yet still cannot complete all the necessary work to deliver a finished game. This is one reason why many games today are released unfinished or full of bugs. Games are pushed out before they are ready due to unrealistic release dates intended to satisfy investors. If the game succeeds, developers return to work under new contracts. If it fails, the work on that game is abandoned, and only a portion of the developer's efforts are compensated because the game was released incomplete. Story 31. End-of-life medical care. For every excellent hospice, there are 10 people connected to machines that do nothing but drain their finances until they officially pass away and billing stops. The intensive care unit is an expensive, one-way trip for most elderly patients. It is a futile process that serves primarily to deplete estates when the only person authorized to refuse treatment is incapacitated. Consider this objectively. You experience a fatal heart attack. A stranger, acting without your consent, takes you to a facility. There, you are connected to machines that keep your body technically alive but with no hope of recovery. You remain hooked up until your children receive nothing from your estate. Then, you are disconnected, and your lifeless body is returned to your family to manage. This is the reality of end-of-life care for many Americans. Story 32. I think modern medicine has a limited capacity to cure conditions, and society's expectations are too high for what a physician can achieve. We can cure many infections with antibiotics. Beyond that, medicine primarily stabilizes the body to allow it to live long enough to repair itself or use its own immune system to recover. However, medical treatment is so expensive that even these interventions can bankrupt most Americans. Story 33. Has anyone mentioned baby formula yet? Look into Nestlé's campaign to exploit rural families in non-Western countries. They lobbied for years with gala cruises and sports tickets to support charts created by their marketing team to appear medically relevant. This allowed them to tell breastfeeding mothers that their milk was not good enough and their baby was not gaining enough weight, then pressure them to provide formula or risk their child being taken away by Child Protective Services. I wish I were making this up, but I am a doctor of philosophy student who studies medical anthropology and global justice. Story 34. After years of John Oliver, I guess all of them, this is a good time to remind everyone that the tobacco industry literally targets children whenever regulations are loose enough to let it happen. This includes actual cigarettes in Southeast Asia and currently all the vapes and nicotine-loaded products in the Western world. Story 35. Health insurance. The moment you use it, they are no longer profiting. Stay healthy or die. Nothing in between. Story 36. The art industry is essentially a tax dodge and a buddy system. An artist creates something and has it appraised for, say, $5,000. Then a millionaire buys it for that $5,000. Next, they get it appraised for $10,000, and later for more as they want to increase their asset base. When they need to sell stock or other assets to pay loans and owe taxes, they have this painting appraised again. Now it might be worth $500,000. Just an example. They donate it to a tax-deductible entity and write off $500,000 in taxes for only spending $5,000. That is how low-quality art can cost so much. Story 37. Shocked not to see the fitness industry among the top. Everyone assumes that since fitness means healthy, anything in the fitness industry must have the client's best interests in mind. Absolutely not. Fitness marketing can be some of the most predatory marketing. It specifically targets people's guilt and low self-esteem to get them to participate in challenges or memberships that are extremely damaging and counterproductive to their overall physical and mental health. People are constantly made to feel guilty about calories and not going to the gym to work out. It harms people's mental health, making them feel bad about eating food, uncomfortable in swimsuits, or constantly trying to hide their bellies because they are ashamed of themselves. It is a terrible industry. Story 38. Porn. Women are given drugs and exploited, involved in human trafficking. Porn sites allow rape videos and child sexual abuse material to remain online because they know it is profitable. Minors become addicted, and actors and actresses are exploited and mistreated. It is a deeply disturbing industry. Porn companies claim they empower women and promote memes, but the reality is horrible and disgusting. Next time you want to engage in this behavior, just use your imagination. Do not support the pornography industry. Story 39. Every response in this thread can be summarized as, this is what happens when industries are deregulated and capitalism is allowed to police itself. Story 40. I am going to go with jewelry. A fair number of people are aware of blood diamonds, and some people are aware of the unethical practices that De Beers has engaged in and therefore avoid diamonds altogether, but the issue is much deeper. You will be hard-pressed to find a gemstone mine that is not exploitative of its labor force, and even harder pressed to find one that is not harmful to the environment. It is an industry rife with money laundering, ties to organized crime, and human trafficking. Industry standard terms are very careful to make it sound like they are protecting consumers so governments do not intervene, but they are actually protecting the industry. For example, a diamond that is manufactured from pure carbon to create a true diamond lattice with a hardness of 10 must be prominently labeled as lab-created or synthetic in marketing. Meanwhile, a low-grade diamond that has a coating on it to completely change its color can be called natural, and the fact that it is treated can be in the small print. You can get a piece of white quartz and sell it as a natural diamond simulant without problem. A cultured pearl will usually have less than a millimeter of pearl around a bead of shell or even plastic. All commercial pearls are cultured. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.